The early morning light was a pale, hesitant gray, barely touching the spires and chimneys of London. It was the kind of light that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the day to truly begin. For the royal household, the day had begun hours ago. In the private apartments, a specific kind of quiet reigned, one that was both peaceful and charged with anticipation. It was the quiet before a storm, a carefully managed storm of protocol, ceremony, and public duty. Today, that storm was focused on one person, Carole Middleton. She stood in the middle of her room, a guest room that was as elegantly understated as it was comfortable, a room that had been hers on many similar occasions. Her reflection in the full-length mirror showed a woman who was composed, but her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She smoothed the front of her dress for the 100th time, a simple but impeccably tailored navy blue coat dress. The choice had been deliberate. It was dignified, unassuming, and appropriate for the occasion. It was the uniform of a mother, a grandmother, and now, something more. She was, in the eyes of the nation and the world, the matriarch of a family that had become the heart of the modern monarchy. This was not her first visit to Buckingham Palace, nor would it be her last, but each visit felt different. The grandeur of the rooms, the weight of history in the very air, the silent, purposeful movement of the staff, it never failed to remind her of the world her daughter had married into. It was a world of ancient rules and modern scrutiny, a world where her every gesture, her every word was analyzed and interpreted. She had navigated it with a grace and resilience that surprised even herself. She had learned the subtle dance of royal life, the art of being present without being intrusive, of being supportive without being overbearing. She was the anchor of the Middleton family, the steady hand that guided them through the tempest of fame and media frenzy. She had watched her daughter, Catherine, grow from a university student into a princess, a mother, and a future queen. That journey had been both a joy and a source of constant, quiet anxiety. Today, however, had a different weight. It was a day of duty, of course, but also a day of subtle, unspoken tensions that only a few would ever sense. She had come to support Catherine, who was participating in a significant engagement at the palace. The Prince and Princess of Wales were deeply involved in a new initiative on early childhood development, a subject close to Carole's own heart. As a mother of 3 and a grandmother to 3 more, she understood the profound importance of those early years. She had built a business, Party Pieces, from her kitchen table, a business that thrived on the very essence of family celebrations and childhood joy. She had instilled a strong work ethic and a sense of groundedness in her own children, a foundation that had served them well in the crucible of public life. Catherine was a testament to that foundation. Watching her daughter command a room of academics, politicians, and dignitaries was a source of immense pride. Carole saw the reflection of her own mother, Dorothy Goldsmith, in Catherine's determination and strength. The Middleton women were a formidable line, built on resilience, practicality, and an unshakable sense of self. They were not born to this life, but they had adapted to it, not by losing themselves, but by remaining true to who they were. The sound of a soft knock on the door broke her reverie. A uniformed footman, his face impassive, informed her that the car was ready. She took a deep, steadying breath, gathered her small bag, and followed him out of the room. The corridors of the palace were a labyrinth of opulence. The deep red carpets, the gilded picture frames, the portraits of monarchs long past who stared down at her with an unblinking, judgmental gaze. They were reminders of the permanence of the institution she was now a part of. She walked with a quiet confidence, her heels making a soft, rhythmic click on the marble floors. It was a sound she had become accustomed to, a sound that was now a part of her life. The path to the sovereign's entrance took them through the grand hall, with its magnificent staircase and the long gallery where state ceremonies took place. Her eyes passed over the priceless artifacts and the intricate plasterwork, familiar sights now. Her mind, however, was on the immediate future. She knew the protocol. She would be taken to a waiting area, a small antechamber, until the official proceedings were underway. She would then be ushered into the main hall to take her seat. It was a choreographed dance, and she was expected to follow the steps. But as they approached a particular crossroads in the long corridor, a subtle shift occurred. The footman leading her turned, not towards the small antechamber, but in a different direction. A new figure appeared, a tall man in the unmistakable uniform of a royal guard. He was an officer, distinguished by the gold embroidery on his tunic and the plum plume of his bearskin cap. His bearing was one of absolute authority and immovable discipline. "Mrs. Middleton," he said, his voice a low, controlled rumble. "His Majesty has requested that you be escorted through the sovereign's entrance." For a moment Carole's composure flickered. The sovereign's entrance. The words echoed in her mind. It was the most formal, the most public entrance to the palace. It was the entrance used by heads of state, by dignitaries on state visits, by the royal family themselves. It was not under standard protocol the route for a private citizen, even one whose daughter was a princess. It was a statement, an honor bestowed upon visiting monarchs and presidents, not on a grandmother from Berkshire. A wave of surprise washed over her, followed by a quick, instinctive calculation. This was not a mistake. Things like this were never a mistake. This was a deliberate act, a powerful signal. The king, Charles III, was making a point. He was signaling to the world, and more importantly to the inner circles of the palace, that Carole Middleton was not just the Princess of Wales's mother. She was a key figure in the royal family. In a world where every action was loaded with meaning, this was a declaration. It was a recognition of her role, her loyalty, and her unwavering support for her daughter and her family. It was an acceptance, perhaps a final, public one, of the Middletons into the very heart of the establishment. She had always known that King Charles was a man of deep feeling, often misunderstood. He was a man who valued family history and tradition, but also a man who was trying to modernize a 1,000-year-old institution. He was a devoted grandfather, and that bond with the Middleton family, through his grandchildren, was clearly a powerful force. By bestowing this rare honor on Carole, he was making a statement about the new, more inclusive, family-centered nature of his reign. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice calm and composed. "Thank you." The royal guard gave a curt, respectful nod and positioned himself to lead her. He walked with a measured, deliberate pace, his massive boots echoing on the stone floor. It was a different route than the one she had been expecting. It took her past the offices of the king's private secretaries, past the bustling rooms where the machinery of the monarchy was run, and towards the iconic balcony, the very spot from which the world had seen her daughter wave alongside the Prince of Wales. The corridor was lined with photographs of royal visits and ceremonies, a timeline of history that seemed to be watching her progress. The sovereign's entrance itself was a magnificent, vaulted space, its ceiling decorated with a breathtaking fresco. The massive doors, made of oak and iron, stood open to the world outside, allowing a sliver of gray London light to illuminate the grandeur within. For a moment, she paused, struck by the sheer scale and history of the place. This was where royal visitors were greeted, where state carriages arrived, where the pomp and ceremony of the monarchy was on full display. And she, Carole Middleton, was being led through it as a guest of honor, a privilege usually reserved for the most powerful figures on the planet. She felt a pang of emotion. It was not a feeling of arrogance or entitlement. It was a feeling of being seen, of being acknowledged for who she was and what her family represented. It was the king's way of saying, "You are one of us now." As she stepped forward, flanked by the imposing figure of the royal guard, she was not just a mother. She was a symbol of a new era. She was walking a path that was being laid out before her, a path that intertwined her own humble story with the grand, millennia-old narrative of the British monarchy. The sound of the guard's boots and her own measured footsteps created a solitary rhythm in the vast, echoing space. The world outside, the bustling city of London, seemed 1,000,000 miles away. The only thing that existed was this moment, this unexpected, almost surreal journey. The walk through the sovereign's entrance was a brief one, a few dozen yards, but it felt like a journey through the entire history of the monarchy. It was a statement of intent, a silent proclamation of her family's place in the grand scheme. It was a story being written in real time, one that would be retold and analyzed for years to come. It was, in its own quiet, powerful way, a complete and utter vindication of the choice her daughter had made, and a triumphant affirmation of her family's enduring strength. The walk through the sovereign's entrance had felt like a dream, a slow-motion sequence in a grand historical film. As she stepped from the cool, vaulted space of the entrance hall into the warmer, more intimate confines of the palace's interior, Carole let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The royal guard, his duty done, gave her one last respectful nod and melted away into the shadows of the corridor, his massive figure swallowed by the opulent surroundings. A new guide, a very different kind of figure, now appeared. She was a senior lady-in-waiting, a woman of impeccable lineage and a face that was the very picture of serene efficiency. Her name was Lady Sarah Fitzwilliam, and she was one of the most powerful yet invisible people in the palace. She was the gatekeeper, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly, that the right people were in the right place at the right time. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. She had been serving the royal family for decades and had seen it all. "Mrs. Middleton," Lady Sarah said, her voice soft and melodic. "What an honor. His Majesty asked that I personally escort you to the viewing gallery. The proceedings will begin shortly." Carole smiled back. "Thank you, Lady Sarah. It's a privilege to be here." The two women walked side by side, their footsteps a quiet counterpoint to the distant hum of activity elsewhere in the palace. Lady Sarah was a master of polite conversation, adept at filling silences without ever saying anything of substance. They discussed the weather, the traffic, the wonderful work the Prince and Princess of Wales were doing. It was the language of the court, a carefully constructed facade that hid a complex web of loyalties, alliances, and unspoken tensions. But Carole was not just any visitor. She was a mother, and her instincts were attuned to a different kind of frequency. She could feel the subtle currents of the palace, the undercurrents of power that flowed beneath the surface of its polished veneer. And as they approached the entrance to the main state room, she sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The air grew cooler, charged with a different energy. The room they entered was a masterpiece of royal design. It was immense, with ceilings that soared high above them, adorned with intricate gold leaf and magnificent paintings. A long, polished table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by Chippendale chairs. It was a room designed for grandeur, for state ceremonies, and for the quiet, often intense, negotiations that shaped the destiny of the nation. A smaller, discreet entrance on the far side of the room led to the royal apartments, a doorway that was a portal to a world of private joys and private sorrows. Lady Sarah gestured towards a balcony that overlooked the main hall below. The Princess of Wales was about to deliver a speech. It was a moment Carole had been looking forward to all day. She took her place on the balcony, a position that offered a perfect, unobstructed view of the proceedings. Below, the hall was beginning to fill with guests. Politicians in dark suits, academics in tweed jackets, dignitaries in their national dress, a sea of faces, all focused on the podium where Catherine would soon stand. Carole's eyes scanned the crowd, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and love. She could see her daughter, the princess, standing to one side, chatting animatedly with a minister. Catherine looked breathtakingly beautiful, her hair perfectly styled, her dress a shimmering emerald green that seemed to absorb the soft light of the chandeliers. She was in her element, radiating confidence and warmth. It was a sight that never failed to amaze Carole. To have raised a daughter who could stand so gracefully in the center of the world stage was a testament to the power of a loving home, to the simple, ordinary values that had shaped her family. But as Carole's gaze drifted across the crowd, it was drawn to a figure in the far corner of the room, standing just inside the doorway to the royal apartments. It was Camilla, the queen consort. She was not part of the official proceedings, not a keynote speaker or a dignitary. She was a silent observer, a shadow in the grand room. Her presence was not unexpected, but it was significant. She was, after all, the queen, and her interest in the work of her stepson, and daughter-in-law was genuine. What drew Carole's attention, however, was the look on Camilla's face. It was a look of quiet, almost penetrating observation. Her gaze was fixed on the doorway through which the royal guard had just escorted Carole. There was no malice in her expression, no animosity. But there was a deep, intense curiosity, a hint of calculation, and perhaps a fleeting shadow of something else. Was it surprise? Was it a touch of unease? Camilla's face was a mask of royal composure, but Carole, a mother and a woman who had navigated the treacherous waters of public scrutiny, had learned to read faces. She could see the flicker of thoughts behind Camilla's eyes, the wheels of a powerful mind turning. She was, in that moment, a silent witness to a private drama. The queen consort, the second wife of the king, was watching the mother of the Princess of Wales being escorted through the most hallowed entrance of the palace. It was a gesture from the king, but it was also a moment of profound symbolism. It was a confirmation of the Middletons' place at the very heart of the royal family, a place that had not always been secure or guaranteed. It was a statement that the king had moved beyond the old tensions and was forging a new, inclusive path forward. Camilla and Carole. They were two women, both born outside the traditional royal fold, both navigating the complexities of a life that was thrust upon them. Camilla, the supposedly other woman, had become queen, a feat of resilience that had astonished the world. Carole, the commoner, had become the grandmother to a future king. Their paths were interwoven, their lives connected by the same family, the same duty, the same unrelenting public eye. They had a shared, unspoken understanding of what it meant to live in the shadow of the crown. But there was a subtle tension in that understanding. They were allies, perhaps even friends, united in their love for the king and his family. Yet they were also representatives of different eras, different struggles. Camilla had been vilified for decades, her reputation tarnished by the ghost of Diana. Carole, on the other hand, had been embraced for her normalcy, her perceived ordinariness, which had become a strength. It was a unique, complex dynamic. As Catherine stepped up to the podium, the room fell silent. The cameras flashed, the microphones amplified her voice, and the world leaned in to listen. She spoke with passion and conviction about the importance of early childhood, about creating a world where every child could thrive. She spoke of her own experiences as a mother, of the challenges and joys of raising children in a world of intense pressure. Her words were powerful and heartfelt. From her vantage point on the balcony, Carole watched her daughter with tears in her eyes. This was the moment she had been waiting for. But even as she listened, a part of her mind was still in that hallway, reliving the walk through the sovereign's entrance, and her eyes were still drawn to the figure of Camilla in the corner. The queen consort's gaze had not moved. She remained a silent, enigmatic observer, her thoughts her own. The two women had exchanged a brief, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement during a lull in the speech, a silent communication that spoke volumes. It was a recognition of their shared reality, a fragile but necessary understanding in a world that was always watching. The speech concluded with a standing ovation, a wave of applause that washed over the room like a tide. Carole, from her place on the balcony, clapped with a fierce maternal pride, her eyes fixed on her daughter as Catherine gracefully acknowledged the applause. It was a perfect moment. A triumph of substance over style, a testament to the power of a message delivered with grace and sincerity. But the drama of the morning was not yet over. The afterglow of the speech was a brief, fleeting interlude. As the crowd began to disperse, the formalities giving way to a more fluid social atmosphere, Carole felt a gentle touch on her arm. Lady Sarah was back, her smile as serene as ever. "Mrs. Middleton," she said, her voice a low whisper. "Her Majesty would like a word. She has requested your presence in the green drawing room." The words were delivered with a practiced neutrality, but they sent a new ripple of tension through Carole's shoulders. The request was unexpected. It was not part of the official schedule. It was a private, informal meeting, but in the language of the palace, nothing was truly informal. The queen consort had seen her watching, had seen her walk through the sovereign's entrance, and now she wanted to speak. It was a summons, a subtle test, a gesture of inclusion, or perhaps a quiet power play. Carole followed Lady Sarah through a maze of corridors, past rooms that were both magnificent and personal. The walls were adorned with family portraits, a visual history of the royal family. There were photographs of the king as a young boy, of a young Queen Elizabeth II, of Prince Charles and Diana, of a grinning Prince William and his brother Harry. It was a gallery of triumphs and tragedies, a reminder of the human cost of duty. The green drawing room was a space that felt both grand and intimate. The walls were covered in a soft, sage-green silk, its color reflected in the delicate hues of the Persian rug on the floor. The furniture was a mix of Chippendale and French design, elegant and comfortable. Large, floor-to-ceiling windows looked out onto a private courtyard, allowing a flood of soft, natural light to fill the room. It was a room for private conversations, for quiet contemplation, and, Carole suspected, for delicate negotiations. And there, sitting in a simple but elegant armchair by the window, was Camilla. She rose as Carole entered, a graceful movement that belied her age. She extended her hand, her ringed fingers offering a gesture of welcome. "Mrs. Middleton," she said, her voice warm and slightly husky. "Do come in. I'm so sorry to drag you away from the celebrations, but I felt we should have a proper chat." Carole accepted the hand, her own fingers cool and steady. "Your Majesty, it's always a pleasure. Catherine's speech was truly wonderful, wasn't it?" Camilla smiled. "It was magnificent. She has such a gift for connecting with people. She's a credit to her family." The words were kind, and Carole felt a genuine warmth in them. "Please, sit down," Camilla continued, gesturing to a chair opposite her. "Tea." A footman appeared as if by magic, carrying a silver tray with a delicate china teapot, cups, and a plate of small sandwiches. The ritual of tea was a great leveler, a soothing British tradition that could soften even the most tense of encounters. Camilla poured the tea herself, a gesture of intimacy that was not lost on Carole. "I wanted to speak with you," Camilla began, her eyes fixed on the stream of amber liquid as it filled the cups, "about something rather important. I was standing in the main hall when you arrived." She paused, looking up to meet Carole's eyes. "I saw you being escorted through the sovereign's entrance." There it was, the elephant in the room. Carole held her gaze, her expression a mask of calm. "It was a wonderful surprise," she said carefully. "An honor I didn't expect. I have His Majesty to thank for it." Camilla nodded slowly, taking a sip of her tea. "Charles is a man of great gestures," she said, her voice thoughtful. "He likes to make his feelings known. He likes to show people that they are valued." She set the cup down on its saucer with a soft clink. "I've been watching you, Mrs. Middleton," she continued, her tone shifting, becoming slightly more direct. "I've been watching your whole family. The way you've navigated this life has been remarkable." It was a compliment, but it was also an acknowledgement of a shared experience. Camilla, too, had navigated a treacherous path to her current position. She had endured decades of ridicule and scorn, had lived in the shadow of another woman's myth, and had finally, against all odds, become queen. She knew the scrutiny, the pressure, the constant fear of saying the wrong thing. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Carole replied. "It has been a journey, that's for sure, but it has also been a privilege. To see my daughter happy and fulfilled, to see my grandchildren thriving, that is all that matters." Camilla leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp and focused. "You are a very strong woman, Mrs. Middleton. You had to be to survive what you did. The press, the public, the constant criticism. It's not easy, is it?" Carole met her gaze. "It's not," she agreed. "But we were raised to be resilient. My mother always said that you have to be able to take the rough with the smooth." "My mother-in-law said something very similar," Camilla replied, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. She was referring to the late Queen Elizabeth II, a formidable woman who had seen it all. She used to say, "It's a job, you do it." And she was right. The conversation drifted to other topics. They discussed the garden, the joy of watching the children grow, the simple pleasures of a quiet evening at home. Carole was careful to be respectful but also relaxed, showing Camilla the same quiet confidence she had shown the world. She was not intimidated, but she was not arrogant. She was just herself. As the tea was finished and the conversation drew to a natural close, Camilla gave her a long, appraising look. "I'm glad we had this chance to talk, Mrs. Middleton," she said. "You and we are both outsiders in a way. We have both had to earn our place in this family, and I think we understand each other." It was a moment of profound honesty, a bridge being built between two very different women. Camilla was not just the queen consort. She was a woman who had fought for her place, just as Carole had. And in that recognition, there was the seed of a deeper alliance. The meeting with Camilla had been a watershed moment, a quiet but significant shift in the palace's intricate social dynamics. It was a recognition of a shared reality, an understanding that they were both, in their own ways, outsiders who had found a way in. Carole left the green drawing room feeling a sense of cautious optimism. The animosity that might have existed, the perceived rivalry between the two women, had been replaced by a fragile but tangible bond. It was a bond forged in the crucible of public scrutiny, a bond of shared experience. As she walked back through the palace's labyrinthine corridors, the grandeur felt less imposing, more like a familiar landscape. She was no longer just a visitor. She was a participant in a complex, unfolding drama. The memory of the sovereign's entrance walk, the sight of Camilla watching in silence, and the subsequent private conversation, it all coalesced into a single, powerful narrative. It was a narrative of acceptance, of integration, of a family finding its new equilibrium. The rest of the day was a blur of official engagements. There were more receptions, more speeches, more handshakes with dignitaries. Carole moved through it all with practiced ease, her smile fixed, her responses measured. She was a master of the art of royal small talk. She could discuss the weather with a foreign minister, compliment a diplomat's wife on her dress, and express deep interest in a charity's work, all with the same earnest enthusiasm. But throughout the day, her mind was never far from the morning's events. She kept thinking about the significance of the sovereign's entrance. It was more than just a door. It was a symbol. It was the king's way of saying that the Middleton family was not just tolerated, they were embraced. It was his way of legitimizing them, of embedding them into the very fabric of the monarchy. It was a gift, but it was also a burden. The more visible she became, the more responsibility she would bear. She also thought about Camilla. The queen consort had been surprisingly open, surprisingly honest. She had shared a vulnerability that was rarely seen in public. It was a powerful reminder that even at the highest levels of power, there were human emotions, insecurities, and a deep desire for connection and understanding. The two women were now, in a sense, allies. They were two pillars of the same institution, supporting the king and his family from their own unique positions. As evening fell, the formal engagements came to an end. The guests departed, the staff began to clean up, and the palace settled into its quiet, nocturnal rhythm. Carole was finally able to relax. She returned to her private room, her feet aching, her mind exhausted but satisfied. She kicked off her heels and sat on the edge of the bed, looking out the window at the twinkling lights of London. The journey she had taken was far from over. The challenges were ongoing, the scrutiny unrelenting. There would be new dramas, new tensions, new battles to be fought. But the events of the day had been a significant step forward. It was a day of validation, a day of acceptance, a day of building bridges. The walk through the sovereign's entrance was a memory she would cherish forever, a symbol of her family's ultimate triumph over the odds. It was a story that would be told for generations, a story of a simple, middle-class family that had become part of the most famous family in the world. She thought about her husband, Michael, who was waiting for her at their home in Berkshire. He would want to hear everything, every detail. He was her anchor, the one person with whom she could be completely herself. She knew that without his quiet, unwavering support, she could never have navigated this life. He was the steady presence, the calm voice of reason, the man who kept her grounded. She thought about Catherine, her daughter, the princess. The speech that morning had been a masterpiece, a perfect blend of policy and passion. She saw the future in Catherine's eyes, a future of hope and progress. And she thought about her grandchildren, the princes and princess who were growing up so fast. They were the reason she was here, the reason she had endured the pressures of public life. They were her legacy, her family's legacy. They were the future of the monarchy, and she would do everything in her power to protect them. The weekend was approaching, and she was looking forward to a quieter time. A time with her family, away from the gold and the glitter, a time of simple, ordinary life. She would cook a roast dinner, she would go for a walk, she would watch a movie with her grandchildren. It was in those moments of peace, in the warmth of her family home, that she truly felt like herself. It was in those moments that she could escape the weight of the crown and simply be Carole Middleton, mother and grandmother. But she knew that her life had changed forever. She was no longer just the mother of a princess. She was a public figure in her own right, a symbol of the modern monarchy. And as she looked out at the lights of London, she accepted that responsibility. She would continue to do her duty, to support her family, and to be a force for good in the world. The walk through the sovereign's entrance was just the beginning. The week following the event was a haze of gentle routines and quiet introspection. Carole Middleton returned to the familiar rhythms of her life in Berkshire, a life that felt increasingly like a sanctuary from the relentless demands of the royal world. The grandeur of Buckingham Palace, with its gilded halls and ancient protocols, faded into a distant, almost dreamlike memory. The sovereign's entrance, the silent figure of Camilla, the private conversation over tea, it all seemed to belong to a different lifetime. In the quiet of her home, she found herself reflecting deeply on the events. It was a practice she had cultivated over the years, a way of processing the whirlwind of emotions and experiences that came with her unique position. She would walk through the gardens, her hand linked with Michael's, and they would talk for hours about the significance of it all. He was a wonderful sounding board, his own perspective grounded in the world of business and family. "You know," she said one evening, sitting on the patio as the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn, "I felt so small when I was walking through that entrance, surrounded by all that history, all those portraits of kings and queens, and yet I also felt incredibly strong, like I belonged." Michael smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You do belong, Carole. You've always belonged. It's just that now the world is finally catching up." His words were a comfort, a reaffirmation of the strength she had always possessed. She was a woman who had built a business from scratch, who had raised 3 successful children, who had weathered the storms of public criticism without ever losing her grace. The sovereign's entrance was a symbol of her journey, a testament to the power of resilience and unwavering family loyalty. The days that followed were filled with the simple joys of grandmotherhood. She helped Charlotte with her homework, listened to Louis's endless chatter about his toys, and watched George practice his royal wave in the garden. These were the moments that truly mattered, the moments that reminded her of the real purpose behind all the pomp and ceremony. It was about creating a happy, stable childhood for these precious children, a foundation upon which they could build their own extraordinary lives. News of the king's gesture had, as expected, reached the press. The story of Carole Middleton being escorted through the sovereign's entrance was splashed across the tabloids and discussed at length by royal commentators. Some interpreted it as a sign of the king's increasing favoritism towards the Middleton family. Others saw it as a calculated move to modernize the monarchy. There were even whispers of a brewing tension, a perceived slight against the other members of the royal family. Carole ignored the noise. She had learned long ago that she could not control what the press said about her. The only thing she could control was her own actions and her own reactions. She chose to focus on the positive, on the warmth of the gesture, on the sense of acceptance and validation it had provided. She knew that there would always be critics, always be those who saw her as an outsider, but she had proven them wrong time and time again. She would continue to prove them wrong. She also thought about Camilla. The conversation in the green drawing room had been a turning point in their relationship. They had acknowledged their shared experience, their shared struggles, and their shared love for the same family. It was a bond that was deeper than any public alliance. It was a bond of mutual respect and understanding. She had a feeling that the two of them would be seeing more of each other in the months and years ahead. They were, in a sense, partners in the same mission, supporting the king and ensuring the stability of the monarchy. The weekend arrived, and with it, a visit from Catherine and the children. The house was filled with the joyful chaos of family life. The sound of laughter, the clatter of toys, the delicious smell of a home-cooked meal. It was pure, unadulterated happiness. Carole watched her daughter, the princess, relaxing in the casual comfort of her childhood home. She was no longer the poised public figure. She was just Catherine, a mother, a daughter, a sister. As the evening drew to a close, Carole found herself alone with Catherine for a few moments in the kitchen. The two women sat at the table, cups of tea in their hands, the soft glow of the kitchen lamp creating a warm, intimate atmosphere. "Thank you, Mum," Catherine said, her voice soft, "for everything, for being there." Carole reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Always, my darling, you never have to thank me." But Catherine continued, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I know how hard it is for you sometimes. The pressure, the scrutiny. I know what it cost you to walk through that door." Carole shook her head, a gentle smile on her face. "It wasn't a cost, Catherine. It was an honor to be there with you, to see you achieve such greatness." "I was so proud of you," Catherine said, her voice cracking with emotion. "When I saw you coming in, walking with the guard, I nearly forgot my words. It was the most powerful statement, that you are one of us, that you belong always." Carole's heart swelled with love and pride. This was her daughter, her beautiful, talented, brilliant daughter. "I am one of you," she said simply, "and that is all that ever mattered." The two women sat in silence for a long moment, a shared moment of deep, unspoken understanding. In that simple kitchen in the heart of a middle-class home in Berkshire, all the trappings of royalty, all the pomp and ceremony, faded away into insignificance. What remained was the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter, a bond that had been forged in love, tested by adversity, and strengthened by time. The walk through the sovereign's entrance was a grand public statement, but this quiet moment of connection was the true legacy. It was the heart of the story, the enduring truth that lay beneath the glittering surface of the crown. It was the story of a family that had, against all odds, found its place in history. Not by changing who they were, but by remaining true to who they had always been. A family built on love, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to each other. And that, Carole knew, was a story that would never be forgotten.